For our next session, we're going to talk about the importance of representing customer success in the boardroom. Did you know that out of multiple board meetings in the year, about one or two of them, the head of customer success in your company will actually be asked to present? And all those other meetings, the customer success executives will be required to probably create some slides so that the CEO can pick and choose what they want to present to the board in all those other meetings where they don't attend. However, there's no class around what should we present to the board, whereas it's absolutely critical that we present the right thing so that we can show the internal value and the impact that we have on our business growth strategy every single time, so that we can get the budget, we can get the people we want. I'm going to invite to the stage a CEO of a startup company that's been presenting to the board around had customer success teams for the last 12 years and had about 5 customer success executives reporting to him. I'm going to invite a vice president of a VC that has multiple companies in his portfolio, and they've seen his share of board of directors meetings and how CS executives present there, and can tell you all about the do's and the don'ts. And I'm going to also have a chief customer officer that you all know and very much like. So I'd like to welcome, and they're going to tell you all about the do's, the don'ts, the what to present, what not to present. And hopefully if any of you is looking to one day to present to the board or already are presenting and kind of like want to fine-tune this and understand how to do this right, this is the session, because you're going to come out with lots of tactical advice. So be sure to write down some notes if you like. So with no further ado, I'd like to invite Tomer Levy, CEO of Logs.io, Ariel Sterman, Vice President at Bessemer Ventures, and the one and only Ziv Peled, Vice President of Customer Success at AppsFlyer. First and foremost, I'd like to ask you, you've seen your share of customer success presentations. What have you seen as like the big no-no, big mistakes you have ever seen in the last few years that you've been in business and you've seen your share of board of directors presentations? What the main like faux pas?
The main faux pas that many people might make at a board meeting, and this is not necessarily specific to customer success, is just generally droning on and on about too much data. Know your numbers. Know all of the metrics and all the important efficiency metrics and customer success KPIs that you're following. But going through slide after slide after slide in front of a board of directors of folks who probably don't have a lot of reference or context around what each number actually means for your business is a big faux pas. And I think focusing in on the most important things that you want to talk about and not just presenting this grasp of data is probably the key thing that I think needs to be done. Got it.
So having too many slides or too detailed information could be overwhelming for the board. Tomer, from your perspective, you've been having customer success executives presenting to the board for the last 12 years. You had multiple customer success executives. What have you seen works and what doesn't? Like, if you had a new CS exec, what would be one or two things that you would coach them on how to present to the board?
I think the most common mistake is a little bit like what Ariel said. You'll have the executive coming to the board, and they'll have a list of bullets. This customer did this person left the company, I'm going to hire a person, I just did this, I just did that. No one cares. Literally, no one cares about that. And I would even say something that you would not like. The board doesn't care about customer success as a function. The board cares about revenues, they care about growth, they care about efficiency. If you want to be strategic, you have to connect to the go-to-market. How is this part of that broader motion? The other side of it is another, usually a very senior customer success executive that is coming. She has been in the seat for different companies, and she's coming very high level, very high, big numbers. And then people are like, oh, this looks good, look really polished. But that is a very common mistake because maybe she doesn't know the details or he doesn't know the details. So there is this fine balance about knowing the details, and you're going to be asked about something, hey, tell me about this. And you're like, oh, let me get back to you. You have one during the board. You don't have two. The second one that you say, hey, what's going on with this process you put together? And like, let me get back to you. And then, okay, this person is not on top of it. So this balance of details and still being in control and being strategic.
Ziv, you've been doing this for a long time now, since you've been in AppsFlyer. What do you think has changed over the years in terms of the type of information that the board is asking? Do you see an evolution, even from the board's perspective, how over the years maybe the board has gotten more sophisticated in the things that they're being asking you?
Definitely. So first of all, it started as a smaller board, less investors. And also the main metrics changed. We started with going over market share. It was very interesting to see because not that it's not connected to revenue, but revenue is secondary. Sometimes even they were a little bit afraid about that, but I think it was the right strategy. But I think over the years, it's getting more mature, a larger board. Also, not only VCs, but also PEs. And then I think that the board members are now looking for us to bring the maturity, bring the revenue metrics, of course.
So would you say that back in 2015, have you guys seen a different change in how sophisticated the board is and the type of things they're asking the CS to present? Like if we compare 2013-15 to 22-23, are we seeing a maturity level in what we're expecting the CS Exec to present?
Connected to AppsFlyer, I started to present in 2014. We were a very early post-A company, and it was very easy to connect market share to customer-obsessed and value to the customers. 2020, 2021, 2022 was very focused on net dollar retention, and welcome to 2023, the GRR year.
Do you think that that was related to the stage that your company was, that the questions they were asking and their focus for the customer success is different based on the stage of the company? Not necessarily that the board is now more educated about customer success in general. What do you think, Ariel?
It really probably varies by the different boards and the different level of sophistication of the investors, executives, and independent board members around the table. And you could have in the same board meeting folks who understand the nuances of customer success and the critical aspect that function holds in connecting sales, marketing, product, and helping drive decisions in each one of those areas. And you could have board members who are really focused on how quickly are getting support tickets rectified or remediated. And I think a lot of investors and board members can be a bit too reactive to the environment around them rather than developing their own sense of sophistication. So I think it is really important to basically ground board members in what's important for your business and the way that you look at customer success in your company, rather than sort of necessarily the benchmarks that are out there. And so kind of seeing the evolution and the growth and the improvement in your metrics and KPIs over time, because the truth is your company is different than any other company. And I think that that's really important, that even if board members are more sophisticated over time in their sense of customer success, it doesn't mean that what they know is really appropriate for what you're bringing to the table.
And you mentioned that throughout the year, even for potentially the same company or different company, you might have different people attend the board session, and sometimes the CEO would be very careful about what they would want the CS Exec to present or what themselves would want to showcase around customer success, depending on who sits in the room. Maybe you guys can share what is the range of how many people might attend a board meeting. Maybe you can expand a little bit about who might be sitting in the room and how much does it change, like the type of audience. And then, Tomer, I'd like you to share, when are you starting to be a little bit more careful about what you want to have presented from a CEO's perspective?
When a customer success executive is invited to the board meeting, they'll often provide their slides in advance, and they may or may not have the opportunity to speak. There's probably 1 or 2 board meetings a year that the customer success executive is given the platform to really lead a handful of slides. But it's important that the management team as a whole is sort of unified in their story, and that there isn't necessarily a lot of contradiction and controversy emerging between management. There can be some tension between sales who are bringing in high ACV deals, but that just aren't the ICP, and it's going to be very difficult for customer success to hold them. And to allow that tension to elevate to the board is not the best way to handle it, particularly because the personalities on the board are very different. You have early stage investors who feel very good about where the company is, especially in 2023 when they invested 7 years ago. And then you have late stage investors who came in the last 2 years at a price that is making them a little bit nervous today. And I think that it's up to the CEO, and Tomer can definitely speak to this a bit more, to sort of make sure that there's a unified message that's transparent, that isn't hiding anything from the board, but isn't unnecessarily revealing in every single issue and problem that arises.
Got it. So when we're presenting to the board, the intention is to show things at a high level, not make them scared. Got it.
You need to be honest and transparent and detailed. Ask a question like, hey, last year you mentioned this really amazing logo and they're not on the list anymore. What happened to them? And I think that not having a slide for every single company that churned, but as an executive being able to talk towards it is very important.
So maybe having some appendix slides in case the board might ask about something that has changed or trends that we're seeing. Tomer, can you share a little bit from a CEO's perspective? Are you only inviting the CS execs when the board is asking you, or you're sometimes making the initiative to invite them? And if so, how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, for sure. All the executives are present in the entire board meeting. So the customer success executive will always be in the room for the majority of the meeting. And I think on the one hand, I said that they don't care about customer success, but I actually think that this is probably the best time to be a customer success executive. And the reason is that 2023 is nothing like we've seen before, at least not for the last couple of years, where it used to be only about sales and show me the next big sales leader. But now people, okay, can you get the customer success leader again to the room? Because I want to see how customers are utilizing the product. I want to see if they're using differentiated feature set. I want to see other consumption. I want to see, are we retaining them? When we don't have all these dollars to spend on new sales, let's think more about customer success. So I think customer success is back and back big time. And I think it's really your opportunity to become strategic in the board. And to address what Ariel said, you said a few really good things. One is alignment and openness. These two things. So alignment, a board meeting will end. I'll get a call from the entire board members, each one at a time, and they don't really know. They've been with the company for years, but say they have 12 boards. What can they say? They can say whether the person, there's alignment. Are we all talking the same language? Is the customer success calling these segment A, and the sales leader calls them segment number 1? Like these small nuances, it's what they use to detect. So alignment with the CEO before, alignment with the executive team, we all have the same message, we row in the same direction is number 1. And then to what extent do you share? I'm a big fan of complete transparency. If you have an opportunity about how you presented the board meeting, I believe in a simple table. What are the key things you're doing? What is the plan for the year? And how you're tracking? If all of them are green, there's a problem. Even for Facebook, when they started, they were not all green. Definitely not today. So I think being transparent, say, hey, there's a problem here. I am on it. I'm addressing it. Here, this is my plan. Versus coming at board later and say, I said it's fine, but actually there's a problem. Yeah, you get one of these. The second time, they're not going to trust you. My bottom line, it's a great time to be a customer success executive, and it's very strategic if you set it up correctly.
Well, thank you so much. So insofar, we talked a lot about how to present to the board and how often do we present, probably once or twice a year, but Ziv, you're preparing slides for your CEOs every single time he's going to the board meeting. Do you have like a fixed format, or do you always connect with your CEO ahead of time to understand what kind of information he would like to present?
So we have a standard template, but we always prepare an alternative, something new, and we send some of the other slides for the alternative slides, and we let the COO or CEO select it. Around once a year, I will always get also the ability to present to the full board. I will always connect to the metrics and the things that are most interesting for them. And of course, I will sync with the CEO before, but I will want also to show them something that is connected to the strategy, connected to those metrics, but not necessarily, maybe it's a new process or a methodology that we have. I really like getting how they think about that. And when we have a board, the board for us, it's 7 hours, ends always with a long dinner. So it's an amazing opportunity to sit with the board members and speak about what we presented. I will always bring 1 or 2 of my leaders to present. So I think, connecting the net dollar retention and the GRR, but also to people that are in the journey 8-7 years at AppsFlyer, leading support or VP customer success of APAC, presenting to the board. I think that the journey of them and them presenting what they've built is also interesting to the board.
For almost every function, I would practically break it into 3 or 4 slides. And the first of which would be something like Ziv had mentioned, which is what's going well and what isn't, like a highlights and lowlights slide to start. And that can be both a mix of quantitative and qualitative data that you want to present. And then, as Tomer mentioned before, kind of having this quarter over quarter perspective on what did we say we were going to do last quarter? What initiatives did we undertake? And where did we land on those initiatives? If it was improving remediation, if it was building a community platform, if it was introducing newer technologies. And then I would have a third slide that sort of is a bit more KPI focused, that kind of has the core things on net revenue retention in this day and age around logo retention. And then you can kind of selectively add like the new exciting thing that gets people happy, the big upsell that you had with the largest enterprise customer in history. And I think that that's also important to kind of give people a sense that things are moving positively. And if they're not moving positively, we're at least taking on interesting initiatives to get there.
Ziv, when do you actually add some slides to showcase your roadmap? How are you going to connect and support the go-to-market strategy? Is it every board? Is it like every board meeting once a year? And if so, is it at a particular time of the year?
It will be every board. We'll always connect to the long-term strategy, and we'll always show the trend. For this year, operational excellence is a big word everyone is speaking about, but in the end, you want to become more efficient and more effective. So we have a very nice graph of that and showing that trend, because we want to show that we are progressing over there. But also to connect, is it not arming anything or etc.
How long is your roadmap strategy?
Today, at this year, and the end of 2025.
So 3
years ahead.
Is that what the board is expecting? Ariel, you have a reaction.
I'm surprised it's so far. I mean, for a mature company like AppsFlyer,
Yeah.
that probably does make sense. Having been an early stage and late stage investor, that level of presentation and planning does change over time. If someone came to the board as a Series A startup and you're head of customer success with a 3-year plan, I know from the beginning that's going to be very different in a year from now, in half a year from now. And it's sort of like, let's focus on what we know and what we can work towards in the next 2 quarters, 3 quarters. And then we'll worry about 2025, 26. But if you're a Series D, E plus company with real revenues and real business, it makes sense to have that level of planning.
Got it. So Series A, B, C, you would focus on the few quarters ahead. If you're Series D, E, public, you would have at least 2 years, if not 3. I've seen companies having 4-year projections, and they're probably with revenues of over $100 million. And Ziv, you said that you're going to the dinner and then you're inviting others. You're actually building relationships with your board of directors. Tell me about that, and why is it important for you? Because you're only really meeting with them officially once a year. So tell me a little bit, what do you do throughout the year with the board of director members?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer of relationships, and it's not only about customer relationships. I think it's a relationship is something very basic, very personal, and I think that it's very important to know your board members. I have most of the board members at a WhatsApp level relationship, and then most of the time they will need things from me.
Throughout the year, they might text you on WhatsApp and say, hey.
Not necessarily about the company. It's mainly about, they are looking to invest in another company. They want me to do a non-formal due diligence or say what I think about one of those companies, if I'm using it or not, or why did I churn some product.
And what do you get out of that relationship for you?
Yeah, so I get a lot, because in the end, they see a lot of companies, they see a lot of practices, and they can connect me to my next customer success vendor or someone that will teach me something new, or
benchmark data?
Benchmark data for sure. Some of our later stage PEs, they are doing for us very deep research. Can be something specifically around customer success, but last year I researched a lot about complaints for customer success managers, and very easily I got input about what Microsoft is doing, what ServiceNow is doing, what Snowflake is doing, etc., etc. Click of a button and a few days after, so that's a very high value from
So if any of you
investors.
don't have your board of directors on WhatsApp,
Use your board members.
leverage them. Absolutely. For their connections, their benchmark data.
If you have Bessemer, use Ariel. He's waiting for your message.
I'll add an anecdote that just happened to me yesterday to emphasize this point. So we have 2 portfolio companies, and many of our portfolio companies are vendors with one another. One of the functional leaders at one of our companies reached out to me and said, hey, this other company in your portfolio, you want to renew the product, but it's a bit too expensive and the alternatives are cheaper and we're not really getting any movement. This was a functional leader who then I I'm being vague because I don't want to be clear. And then I reached out to, it was actually the chief customer officer of the other company who has this churn risk that is going to happen.
Who's also in your portfolio.
Who's also in our portfolio that I have a direct relationship with. And I messaged to her, this is the situation. And she was actually pretty shocked. She said, well, they actually auto-renewed 2 weeks ago. Oh. I'm surprised they're mentioning this to you right now. And it's like, yeah, you have a relationship with your functional leader, but there's a whole finance department behind them today that is also causing some trouble for customer success leaders. And just having that level of flow of information where we might be able to come in and help you mitigate a churn risk or help drive an upsell is a tremendous value add where it's possible.
Got it. And I think a lot of people in the audience, sometimes when you have a churn risk for a strategic customer, you're thinking about leveraging your internal connections, seeing who has connections with other people within that client's base, maybe leverage it to the CEO, and not everybody's thinking, hey, maybe the board of directors knows somebody that can help with that, especially if it's a strategic large customer. So thank you for sharing that. Tomer, let's talk a little bit more about what to present. You had a series of things, and Ziv also mentioned, we need to map what we're doing to the go-to-market strategy. And I think if you've never done it before, I would be like, well, I don't know how to do that. So what have you seen? Like, you've seen a lot of different customer success executives. Where does it really work? What kind of metrics do we need to focus on? Is it really just ARR and GRR, or is it something else? Is it the way they present it, the way they talk about the slides? Do we need to think about certain graphs that should be included in those slides? Can you break it down for us a little bit?
I'll do my best. This is a hard question because it's very dramatically between a Series A company and a high-scale company like AppsFlyer. It's completely different. So you really have to understand what are you trying to do, what is your goal for the year, and then set it. I would say generally I very much agree with Ariel on probably 3 slides. I know we have so much to say. We know so many details. There is so much to... How can I fit it into 3 slides? The people are impatient. They're coming to the board meeting. They don't have the patience to go through 20 slides, or even when they read it at home, they're looking for a condensed version. So the first slide is the top. Like you read the news, you open the paper, you see the headline. If you only read the first slide, you'll have all the context. Our mission for this year is ABC. We've achieved these 3 big milestones. We had some issues here with this big logo. You all heard about the churn. It happens. We're going to address it. I like to put the key KPIs on the top. For customer success, at least in my organization, is a lot about the growth of the ARR. A lot of it comes from the base, like in what percentage have we committed, planned, forecast. Obviously, churn is key. So, how do you manage it? What is the expectation and where are you against expectations? I think a lot about customer success with adoption, and these are hard metrics to find, but I would put the metrics around how people have adopted the platform. From 200 customers that I have, if 100 of them have not configured, send the data, onboarded users, or on the contrary, we're seeing a growth in adoption, this is a proxy for the future. And next, I really like a table. I know people like graphs. I don't like graphs. I like tables. They usually were analysts before, and they know how to use Excel. So I like to, at least, what are the 3-4 things I'm trying to do this year? How am I tracking for the quarter? Where am I? And in the end, there's probably a few graphs, a few analytics, like how we're making progress, what's working, what's not. They're looking at how we're doing it as a business. Suddenly, if you talk about revenues and growth and retention, you become strategic, especially these days. They look for alignment. We talked about it. Are we all aligned as an executive team? And they look at you. Are you executing? They have no idea what you wrote in the table. They literally read it and say, yeah, that makes sense. We're going to do this. I have no idea. All they're looking for is someone that they will look at this slide, exactly the same template, it's very important, but having the ability to say, okay, they said they're going to do something, they did it. They said they're going to do it, they did it. They said, this is not happening, fine. There's an explanation, we're going to do it next quarter. This is execution, so it's really about any executive in the room, they're looking to see if they're executing. As simple as that, 3-4 slides, align with the CEO, align with the executive team, come to the board. Usually you will not present in every meeting, that's true for us as well. But when you present, it doesn't mean you don't need to know the details. You need to do way, way more than is listed there. You have to be on top of things, on top of the nuances. An example is very important. If you want to read how the best do it, listen to an earning call for a public company in your space. And then you'll usually listen to the high level, the CEO, the CFO talks about the high level, and then they take an example of a customer. This customer just did this, they did this great upsell, they moved from one product to two products. They give an example, and the example tells the whole story that you're trying to convey in a more emotional and more pragmatic way. I think it's as simple as that.
So start with an executive summary with a key objective, key things that happened during the year, key metrics, then maybe expand a little bit on what are your strategy initiatives, how are you doing based on what you promised last quarter, if you're having any holdups. You also mentioned sometimes adoption is important if it's part of your key growth strategy, and I'll just expand on that because you also mentioned that what's most important to the board is profitable growth. Profitable growth can be achieved by new logos and existing logos. It's my contention that customer success actually can impact both. New logos by having advocacy and relationship that when the person is moving to another company, they can bring you again, as well as existing by expanding the wallet share. Do you think that, or do you expect your customer success executives to expand on how did we impact new logos by, did we increase our advocacy? Did we increase our wallet share and upsell? Are those important things to share as well beyond ARR and GRR?
Yeah, absolutely, super. And I think when someone looks at the brand of a company, especially a company that has been out there for a while, the customer success story, the people coming to conferences and speaking on your behalf, the deep adoption, because once there's success, we're measuring a significant amount of our customers, new logos, actually come from customer champions that left and brought us to their new company. So I think that's a way that customer success really impacts revenues. It's relatively cheap. You don't have to market to them. They like you. They buy quickly. I think the more you can have, if you have the grasp on these numbers, and again, small stage, Series A, where I think a lot of people are, you don't need 500 logos. You need like two more here, and one that left and brought us, and that is a huge impact on the business. So I would definitely make room to talk about it.
Ariel, you've seen a lot of board of director presentations. Do you agree with what Tomer said? Are there any other slides or questions that needs to be answered when we're presenting about customer success to the board?
It comes down to also aligning with the CEO and the leadership on anticipating what the board might ask given the circumstances of the company or the market in particular. And if you think about 2023 and 2022 for that matter, everyone fears budget cuts. Everyone is at a hiring freeze, right? There aren't really increases in headcount. And so a big topic for every board meeting is how are we doing more with less? Whether, unfortunately, if you've undergone a reduction in force or whether you just are unable to hire at this point due to budget constraints, how is customer success also going to do more with less? As a very human and relational task and job, which almost can scale one-to-one with your customer base, how are you introducing efficiencies? How are you introducing automation? How are you lowering the footprint of customer success by working together with product on providing, easier implementation and onboarding, on working together with sales on speeding up the actual implementation time and professional services, on working with customers to self-produce your marketing content rather than having to really handhold them in that journey. And I think being able to provide that perspective to the board on here's how we're utilizing more with far less, and hey, if you gave us more, we'll be able to do even more than that. I think that that's kind of a big topic of concern. And a lot of it also comes down to ensuring ERR, which I presume is a gross revenue retention, is one metric, but I think also today gross logo retention is even more important. Because if you're bringing in logos that are not the ICP, and they're small logos, it might not look like it's really impacting GRR when they churn, but it's impacting your efficacy of your support, of your success, of your actual customer acquisition spend, and really making sure that everyone together is aligned on bringing in the right customers, especially in a time like today, that doesn't just pump the top line, but actually will introduce that lifetime value and keep them retained. If I'm a new investor, and this is from the VC perspective, looking at a company at a Series C or Series D, and I see a leaky bucket, even if top line growth is really, really impressive, but hey, the churn is growing too, that's enough for me to walk away.
Got it. For those of you who don't know what ICP means, I'm sure most of you do, is the ideal customer profile. Usually is something that's being defined typically by the marketing team, and it just means that we're defining the customer that we want to sell to so that we don't have bad fit clients, which are very hard for customer success to deal with and causes a lot of year one churn typically. Ziv, you've heard these two gentlemen, we heard from a CEO, we heard from a board member. For you, when you just got started, and a lot of people I think in the audience, they talk a lot about the GRR and ARR. Some of the people in the audience maybe don't have those tracked yet because they're just too young, or maybe they don't have the right systems in place. Often I hear folks don't have really churn data or upsell data in a very clear, easy to capture way, let alone down sales. Usually that's not really clearly, definitively separated in systems. Did you have to go through that journey where you had to fight a little bit or collaborate with IT a little bit or whomever to get that data so that you could present it to the board? And until you got to that point, somebody in the audience is at that point, what would you recommend them to present if they don't have upsell data, they don't have ARR calculated, they don't have GRR, maybe they don't even have churn data? What should they present to the board? Should they just give it up until they do?
It's an evolution. So today we have analytics and we have everything available. But I think that if I go back to the early days, then start with a spreadsheet. You don't have churn data, go and interview your current customers and learn about there's a different answer that you will get from them now when you'll interview them now when they're leaving, or whether if you're meeting them in 2 months, 3 months from now, also ask why they left again, but also look to see, like maybe they said that they don't need a solution, but now you see they have an alternative solution. So I think that's important, and I think go back to the basics. The data that you don't have, generate it, even if it's done manually in Excel. And of course, when the company grows and goes to the next level, you need to invest in better reporting and to have the data available for you. Because I think even for a post-A company, I think you want to have a trend, and then manual is not good enough.
My last question to you is, I heard from all of you, customer success executives don't really attend every single board meeting. They might be invited to 1 or 2 throughout the year, and mostly they just provide the slides for the CEO to present. If they don't present, should they attend all the board of directors meetings, or does that relate to the life cycle of the company?
It's a tricky question because in the end you don't want to have 40 people attending a board meeting. The answer, at least for me and for maybe a growth stage company, is I need to make sure that my CEO and COO represent me in the meeting, or my slides, the board members that are getting that a few days before the meeting, that my slide represent me in the meeting. And then I think that over time, I don't want to say the word educate, but again, like the board members now, some of them knows me for 10 years. I think that like I'm educating them of what I'm doing over time, and I'm also looking to get their feedback. So I think that's important.
It also comes down to a matter of seniority. If you were first hire as a customer success lead or head of customer success, if you start bringing them to the board meetings, at some point you may hire a VP or a chief customer success officer that then replaces them at the board, and that's sort of an uncomfortable dynamic. But I do think that once companies get to a certain stage where there's a clear senior customer success leader, and he or she is in good grasp of their business and their function, it is helpful to attend board meetings. And in general, I view board meetings as doing more listening than talking always. And you learn a lot from the board questions that are being asked, from the specific details that certain board members may or may not want, the customers that they ask about the churn and the ones they don't care about, how sales and marketing is representing things to the board that may affect how you also want to be representing things. So to the extent it's possible to join those meetings, I do think it's helpful. Though having to present at each one is probably not the best use of everyone's time, because the truth is not a lot may have changed from quarter to quarter in terms of the overall strategy.